Hello modders, let's take a look at DHS checkpoints. So the way DHS checkpoints work is when you save a DHS checkpoint, it just saves the entire world. So unlike the vanilla system where you set up a complicated system of spawns and decide which enemies, like you have a whole goal system and all that, when you save a DHS checkpoint, it just automatically saves the entire state of the world. So this includes movements of characters, whether they know about you, whether they're dead, the health they have, also includes the movement of your own character. And it's just all automatic. It's a set it and forget it system. Very simple, very easy to use, and once you get the hang of it, honestly takes like 5 minutes to set up. So we're going to be looking at two different type of checkpoint systems in this video. So the first one is going to be something similar to the vanilla system, where you can hit checkpoints, locations where it saves your checkpoint, and then you can also defeat enemies and save the checkpoint that way. And then after that, we're going to take a look at a quick save system that you can do with DHS that gives the player a bit more power over when and where they want to save. But speaking of saving, how do you save a DHS checkpoint? Well, this is really, really easy. So the DHS checkpoint function is right beneath check character state. You want to click on that. Looks like this. Has two modes, save and load. And you can type in a different save name if you like, and you could go with a whole system of different save and different saves, different loads. But for most people, it's easy to just leave this as save, and to just, when you do load, just load the latest. So making the checkpoint work, super, super simple. In the case of a location checkpoint, you just want to say, oh, did the character enter? All right, save. Important thing to know is that DHS also, when it saves a checkpoint, it also saves the position of the lines in every hotspot. Very useful. And we'll see why in a moment here when we take a look at the load one. But in this case, that's all you need for a location hotspot. So I got a couple of these here, 1, 2, 3, a few of these, I guess. And then we come over to the enemy section. It's all about how you structure this. You can structure it any way you like. In my example, I'm just checking to see if all the guards are not awake. We're going to save a checkpoint there. And then I've also provided an example where you might want to have a little more conditions on your checkpoint. We don't want the character to just run past the guards and get to the next checkpoint. So we're also going to say, well, if the character enters here and the guards are not awake, then we're going to save the checkpoint. So that is an example of an overgrowth location-based system. One thing we haven't gone over yet is how you would load the checkpoints. Well, that's as simple as switching the mode over to load and having some sort of condition, usually the player dying. And now you notice here I have saved a checkpoint right at the very beginning of the game. That's just to prevent any unusual bugs. But for checking if you're dying, all we're doing is saying, oh, is the character not awake? All right, load the latest checkpoint. And because when you load a checkpoint, it jumps the hotspots to the line they were at when the checkpoint is loaded, it's going to jump this hotspot back to this line again. Very handy. That way we don't have to do any sort of looping check with go to line. So let's do a quick demonstration of that. We start here, jump to our death, and boom, we just start at the start again. Gonna jump over here, hit one. Let's hit another one real quick. Let's hit this one. Now we're gonna jump to our death. And now, oh, that one bugged out a little. Let me try that again. I might have just, the hotspots might not have been reset again. Yeah, now we spawn back at this one here. You notice that first time it didn't spawn us back. DHS checkpoints do occasionally have weird bugs. It doesn't normally happen. It's pretty rare, but it is one of the risks of using a system that does everything for you. Sometimes it will make mistakes and you won't understand why. But that won't happen very often. It is usually a fairly reliable system. So I'm going to hit this next checkpoint here. And then, let's say I am a naughty player and I just want to skip everything. So I see these enemies, but I'm like, ha! I can cheat the system. I'm just going to run past to this checkpoint. Actually, I accidentally covered this over, but it should be somewhere in this area. All right, I know I've run over it now. And then I accidentally die. Well, I'm actually going to load back here because I didn't trigger either the defeat checkpoint or that checkpoint, because that checkpoint was checking to see if I defeated these guys before allowing me to hit it. But now, we're going to defeat these guys. And then just to show you something real quick, I'm going to die here. Now remember how I said the checkpoint saved the exact details of the world? Well, look at the enemy here. He goes flying just as when we kicked him, because it saves the world exactly as when we saved it, including the locations of the enemies, whether they're alive or not. In this case, the enemy was dead, but still flying through the air when we kicked him, and it saved it. So now that the enemy there is dead, it should save the checkpoint, as you saw, and then when we hit this one, which I've accidentally made it invisible here, we should now be able to reload right at the very end. There we go. So that is an example of how to do a vanilla checkpoint system, or one that works pretty similar. Now, let's take a look at how you would do a quick save system instead, where the character has a bit more control. We won't change the loading system. That doesn't really need to change. In an actual game, you probably want to put like a bit of a timer here, a death message, things like that. So you'd probably like wait 3 or 4 seconds before bringing the character back. But in this case, just for simplicity's sake, we are going to just pop the character back right away. So, in a quick save system, it's still very, very simple. You decide what button the character is going to have to press to quick save the level. Now, I've chosen E. That's actually a horrible choice because it's the button for sheathing weapons and such, but it's just really simple and easy to press, easy to remember. In your case, you'd probably want to choose a button that the player is less likely to press, but that doesn't really do anything in game, but it's still pretty easy to get to. Pardon me. But in this case, we're just going to use E for the sake of the example. So I'm going to check and see, did the player press E? Then we don't want the player to accidentally save a checkpoint in a bad situation. So for example, let's say our player jumps off a cliff and then accidentally saves the checkpoint as they're falling down the cliff to their death. Well, when the checkpoint loads, they're going to appear off the cliff again, and now they're just repeatedly falling to their death. They're having a horrible time. They quit the mod and tell you you're a horrible person. So we don't want that. So we want to set a few conditions. Depending on how your level is set up, these conditions might be a little different, but they're there to make sure the character hopefully doesn't save a checkpoint in a very bad spot and ruin the game and have to restart their entire level. Now, with the character being able to set their own checkpoints, there's still a risk of them doing this, but if you set some safeguards in place and clearly, let the player know about them, then they're much less likely to set a checkpoint in a very bad position. Now, so I've decided that the conditions for saving a checkpoint here will be the character has to be awake. Now remember, in a normal system, you'd probably want a bit of a timer after you die, and if you were to accidentally save a checkpoint while you're lying dead on the ground, it can't happen here because you just jump back right away. But in a normal system, if you were to accidentally save a checkpoint while lying dead on the ground, then the checkpoint's going to load and you're still going to be dead on the ground. So we want to make sure the character is awake. We also want to make sure the enemy team over there doesn't know about the character. Another way to do this would be make sure they're not in combat, but I've gone further and said, no, the team can't even know about the character. If the character gets spotted and gets into a fight, they got to try to push through it. So the checkpoint won't save when a enemy character knows about them. And finally, we want to make sure the character isn't moving. So this hopefully stops the player from saving a checkpoint while they're falling through the air or just in the middle of a bad jump or things like that. The character has to stand still, meaning they're hopefully standing on like a solid, safe piece of ground, because if they're sliding or falling, it won't trigger. They have to stand still and then press the checkpoint button. If this happens, the checkpoint saves and then waits 10 seconds. In your system, you might want to be 30 seconds, a little longer, something like that. I don't know. Just so that the character can't spam these saves. And then it goes back and allows the player to save another checkpoint. So just to reiterate, we check for a button press. We make sure the character isn't in a precarious situation. We save the checkpoint, we wait a little bit, and then allow the player to save another one. And in your system, you might also want to put some sort of message up or some sort of sound effect to let the player know that they pressed the button successfully. So let's demonstrate that one real quick. Right, so I'm going to stop, stand still, and press E. Now, if I did that right, and I wasn't moving at all, when I jump off, I should appear back on the red square, like that. Now I'm going to jump over to blue square, and I'm going to press E, but I'm going to keep running. And what we should see is that when I fall off, I'm going to appear back on the red square, because when I tried to save the checkpoint, I was moving. So now let's save another checkpoint over on this side. We're just going to come over here. Then I come over here. Enemies see me. I'm like, oh no! Well, I should probably save a checkpoint. Hit save. Let's go jump to my death. And we actually jump back here, because as soon as the enemies saw me, that means they knew about me, and that means I couldn't save a checkpoint. But I could run over here. And now when I jump off, I appear here. Now, the reason that happened is because when I ran over here, actually I'm not sure if I stopped moving, but aside from that, 10 seconds hadn't passed. So all the conditions have to be in place for the player to properly set a checkpoint. But this gives the player a lot more freedom in how they want to save their game. And I think actually in a number of levels this could be much more enjoyable, especially longer levels, or just areas where it's just really hard to tell where a player is going to find things really hard and where they're just going to breeze through them. So it has its pros and cons, but I think it's a pretty good system, as well as the vanilla system. And you could also use them in tandem. So you could automatically save and also let the player save. Or you could give the player a limited number of quick saves. That's another option. Assuming you already know how to use DHS and just haven't used this function yet, I'm sure you can imagine many different ways you could set your own rules for making checkpoints. But in conclusion, as you can see, Drika hotspot checkpoints are ridiculously easy to set up and use. And yeah, they just don't take any time at all. They're fairly reliable. And with a little bit of careful thought as to how you use them and the conditions under which they trigger, this could be a really viable, solid checkpoint system for you to set up in your games. And anyone, even people new to Drika's hotspot, can quickly learn how to set this sort of thing up. So, if you haven't done checkpoints before in your level, or you know somebody who hasn't done checkpoints before in their level, and they're just having trouble with the vanilla checkpoint system, and they're looking for something easy to use, maybe this is the system for you. Either way, Hope you find this useful, and I will see you all in the next video.